Hey, what's up, YouTube? I'm here to bring you my CHRONOJET Dragon deck profile. There's not really much, like, so, from what most people are playing, most people are just playing, like, 4 Swirlers, maybe, like, a couple more Gungan Rams, or, like, maybe, like, Friend of the Underworld Ling, and, that's pretty much it. Like, some people are even, like, playing, Edens for the mirror match. But I actually got, like, some better spice for the mirror match, low-key. Like, I didn't even know this would be good in the mirror. Like, I was just thinking about the Ava matchup. But let's go ahead and get into it. Of course, you have to have the CHRONOJET ride line. There's really not much to explain here. Let's put this over here for now. Put this over here. Let me actually move that down. That's probably, like, a better idea, to be honest, low-key. Let's move these two down here. And let's get into let me put the crest right there. And let me just start with the G-Zone. So the G-Zone is obvious. It's going to be the same for every CHRONOJET deck. It's going to be four of Fate Rider, and then 4 copies of Next Stage. But what I did want to show you is I wanted to show you the more or less correct way you should flip over your G cards. Because like, in my first couple matches, like, I would organize my G-Zone on purpose, because, like, I'm a very organized person. I like to organize the cards. And then I would stride into Fate Rider and accidentally flip over a Fate Rider, which was not what I wanted to do. Most of the time, it didn't matter, because more often than not, like, by 3rd stride, the game's over. Or by 2nd stride, the game's over. But in case it does run long, this is more or less the correct way you do want to flip over your G-Zone. So you want to go into Fate Rider first, and then flip over a Next Stage. And then, more often than not, you will go into Next Stage first. What I found was, playing this deck, was that even on turns that I didn't think I would kill, I still go into Next Stage to just decimate my opponent's hand. And I either killed, which was very surprising. Like, I didn't think I'd kill. My opponent was, like, at 3 damage. I had, like, a ton of cards in hand, but I killed through it anyway, just because, like, the crest is a really powerful card, just for the 5k for every face-up card in the G-Zone, added with CHRONOJET's Guard Restrict. So, your first stride is always Fate Rider. Your second stride, even though sometimes it doesn't seem like the most optimal play, it's more often than not always Next Stage. Now, your third stride, what I found from playing, my third stride more often than not was always another Fate Rider, and for the other Fate Rider, you do want to flip over again another Next Stage, just because it is a little bit harder to stride into the Next Stage. From what I found in my play testing of the deck, like, it's easy to set up the first Next Stage, but it's harder to set up the second Next Stage, just because of how fast the game goes and how fast you go through your cards. You're not always able to comfortably, like, stride into a second Next Stage. But you always do want to keep your access. In my opinion, at least, you always do want to keep your access to a second Next Stage, just in case you do need to stride into a second Next Stage. If you have the option of striding into a second Next Stage, that's probably game. But and then your last of the let me actually put this. How can I do this? There we go. A little bit of organization for y'all. And then for your third Fate Rider, I would just flip up Fate Rider. I wouldn't copium tell you you're gonna, like, stride into all 4 Fate Riders, which maybe you might. I'm not going to, but maybe you might. You might stride into all 4 Fate Riders. But this is generally how you want your G-Zone to be set up for a normal game playing this deck. First stride, Fate Rider, flip up Next Stage. Second stride, Next Stage, if possible. Sometimes it's not even possible for you to set up the second stride Next Stage, because you couldn't get to a CHRONOJET, or, you know, the game is just, again, it's going so, because this is a very aggressive format, maybe the game was going so fast that you can only keep a stride fodder, you couldn't keep a CHRONOJET. But your third stride more often than not will be, if you get to a third stride, your third stride more often than not will be another Fate Rider. Fourth stride is either Fate Rider or next stage if you're able to next stage, but I just want to keep that option open. So that's why I do recommend for any newer players that do want to get into Standard and start playing Gear Chronicle, like Premium players, for example, V-Premium players that don't really pay attention to Standard, but now Standard has Stride, so they want to play Standard. This is how I would set up your G-Zone. I think I'm just going to keep it like that. But onto the main deck. For the grade 3s, we are maxing out on... How far can I go? I can go that far. We're maxing out on our CHRONOJET Dragons. Even though it's searchable from the drop zone, it is searchable from the deck. I do still want to max out on this card because I do want to have the chance of seeing it outside of searching it, just in case I'm not able to search it before I do get to my second stride turn. I'm playing two Bollies here. I never felt like I needed more, to be honest. Maybe if you're a deck just more focused on not playing the grade 2 game when it presents itself and riding up, maybe you do play more Bollies, or maybe you play like more defensive cards. But two Bollies always seemed like it seemed like really good for me personally. I would always search one, and then whenever I saw the second one, I would just automatically call it to field, because it's a 23k beater by itself if you tuck something to the bottom of your deck or your opponent's deck. And then, of course, 5k for every face-up in the G-Zone. It becomes a pretty big boy. Getting onto the grade 2s, like, this is the bread and butter of your deck. This is, like, the best grade 2 of your deck. Upstream Dragon. So you do want to play maxing out on your Upstream Dragons. Ideally, you want to keep... Sometimes you do have to rush with your Upstream Dragon, especially if you're playing the grade 2 game. But ideally, you want to keep one Upstream Dragon for your stride turn on your Fate Rider, because you want to swing Upstream Dragon, turn Upstream Dragon into a grade 1 that either soul charges you a card or draws you a card, like GG. And then swing with another grade 1, and then turn that into another Upstream Dragon, and then turn that Upstream Dragon into another grade 1 that either soul charges you a card or draws you a card. And then... Is that off screen? No, it's not off screen. We're playing 3 copies of this Steam Fighter. So this Steam Fighter, its ability is when it's put on... Is it just when it's put on Guardian Circle? Let me see here. Yeah, when it's put on Guardian Circle, you can Soul Blast when it gets 5k shield. But if you have a face-up card in your G-Zone, it gets plus 10k shield instead of plus 5. Or no. It's exact wording. It gets another plus 5. No. Yeah. I said it right. So this is a 15k shield if you strode already, 10k shield if you didn't. The reason that I'm playing this was so in the tournament that I was playing Brody instead of this card, but this is actually better than Brody. My idea was that Brody is better in the early game, but more often than not, I found myself in the early game, the mid game, I found myself with a loose remainder soul that I really couldn't do anything with, or a 2 loose souls that I really couldn't do anything with, and this actually would have just come in more clutch than the Brody. So that's why we're playing it at 3 copies instead of the 3 Brodies that I was playing in the local tournament, the Versus Locals, which you should check them out, by the way. Versus Locals in Oviedo Mall. It's a very great locals, very great staff, very great Vanguard community, to be honest. That's all I really got to say about it. But for our tech card, for the last of our grade 2s, we're playing 2 copies of Diablo's Edge. Now, this is a card from all the way in set 2. This is a card from all the way in first set 2 of standard format. So you might not know what this card does. This is one of my favorite cards in the beginning of standard format, because I literally built a deck around this card. The deck build was giving it the Quen Lu ability so your opponent couldn't perfect guard it, and then making him super fat so that it was basically an unblockable number, and then you swing with it twice in Bruce. But it has a very good utility in the CHRONOJET deck, because his effect is Rearguard Circle, act. Not once per turn, by the way. You could Soul Blast 1. You Soul Blast 1 and your opponent can't intercept for the rest of the turn. But if you're in Final Rush, it gets 5k until the end of turn. So this ability is really good in this deck because the number one reason why I played it is because the Ava matchup is like a slightly tougher matchup than normal, just because they have access basically since the start of the game to 10k shield grade 2s and 10k shield grade 3s. So this actually just makes it so that they can't play with their front row. Like, you don't have to. If they have like a back row, you don't have to tuck back row, front row with your CHRONOJET stride skill. You can actually save the counterblast if they don't have a back row. More often than not, I see Ava players, they just play with front row instead of a back row. But you could basically make their front row useless. And make their front row useless. And this is actually really good in the mirror, which I found that out. I was like, oh, I played this shit for Ava, but like, it's actually really good in the mirror, especially if they have one of these Steam mains on the board, and they rush you with them, because they're thinking like, oh, these are like perfect cards to rush with, because when I intercept with them, they're 10k shields. And then you just Soul Blast 1, and you basically tell them like, yeah, you're not intercepting. And I'm going to counter rush your counter rush, and I'm going to push you. More often than not, when I did do the Diablo's Edge Granary, it was enough of a push turn to whereas more often than not, in the mirror, my opponent chose to ride up. It was the correct decision to ride up. There was actually one instance that my opponent chose not to ride up, and like it was a very grindy, like, what's it called? Fight for first stride, but I basically got to the point where it's like his hand was like so weak. I rode up because I thought I had the opportunity to kill him, but he barely survived because he just like wanted to pass my Vanguard. I didn't get anything, but this is just a very powerful card. Getting onto the grade ones, I was playing 4 Gungan Rams for the local tournament, but I actually decided to cut Gungan Ram to 2 cards. The reason I'm playing Gungan Ram over Swirler is my theory is, if I don't see GG, Gungan Ram is basically like a more expensive GG that I could use in the early game. So that's my reasoning for playing the Gungan Rams. I felt like 4 was too much, and you could play Swirlers instead of the Friend of the Underworld Lings. Like, I'm playing with this slot right now, but I definitely want to have this or Swirlers in the slot, because my idea is, if I don't have enough soul to draw off GG when I time leap with Upstream Dragon or when I time leap with Fate Rider, my ideal target is either a Brain Swirler or a Friend of the Underworld Ling, because Ling lets me deck thin, because she lets me look at the top 2 cards of my deck, put one to soul, put one to bottom, and then obviously Swirler gets fat every time you soul charge. So those are your ideal targets off of that. And every time like I searched Gungan Ram, because I didn't really have a better target, it really didn't feel like an ideal target for Time Leap. But on to the rest of our grade 1s. 4 copies of Gigi. This is like the star of your deck. There's really no reason not to play 4 copies of her. Literally, all you have to have is a Crest. Soul Blast 2, draw a card. It is a very good card. Very good. And that's why this deck like plays the grade 2 game, even to begin with, just because you're able to just like eke out like small little points of advantage. Let's put that here. 4 Stride Fodders. Not much to talk about here. This helps you search CHRONOJET from the drop zone or from deck. So if you're out of CHRONOJETs in deck, you can just search from the drop zone. More often than not, what I found myself doing in the early game is I would pop this off to search a jet, add it to my hand, and then I'll either use my Gungan Ram to draw a card, or I'll use GG to draw a card, or Soul Charge a card. So it was really good for that sense. It was really good just for like the deck thinning alone, not just for the fact that it's Stride Fodder, not just for the fact that it could search your Stride Fodder for your next stage. And then 3 of the DPG, nothing much to talk about here. DPG is the most busted PG. And then 1 of the Elementary of Sanctitude. This is actually like a mandatory in every deck right now. Like, of course, like, I'm speaking solely if, like, you play competitive. It's really a mandatory card in every deck right now. Like, there's no way you can get away with not playing this. Like, even if you have to burn it on their first stride, it's like very helpful in just helping you survive the turn, to whereas like you could either stabilize on the crackback or kill them on the crackback. So it's just like a very important card that I feel like every standard overdress deck like really needs to play right now. Even though I do know it is in a very expensive promo, of course, because it only came in the trial decks, and the trial decks are basically sold out at this point. But let's get on to the triggers. One Dark States OT. Really not much to talk about here. If you flip the Dark States OT, it's really hard for your opponent to win. Like, it's possible. I've done it, like, towards my opponent flipped offensive Dark States OT on me, and I still was just able to kill him because this deck exudes so much pressure. But it's really hard for your opponent to win when you do flip this up, especially if you're swinging with Next Stage with a crit, and then you swing with CHRONOJET with a crit. Like, it's just basically like death at like 3 or 4 damage. For the rest of our triggers, we're actually running a very interesting trigger lineup that I strongly recommend. You don't have to play this trigger lineup, but I strongly recommend it because it makes the most sense to me. And this is literally what helps me win the grade 2 game in the mirror / survive long enough to whereas I'm able to stride. So I'm playing 4 copies of the effect fronts. The effect fronts are really good in the early game, again, because you're setting up lines that do lose to 1 defensive trigger. So I always swing with my Vanguard first, you check a front, now they don't lose to a defensive trigger, and your opponent still has to expend 1 or more cards to guard these attacks or just eat them. So it's really good in the early game. It also, again, really good just for helping you survive. Even if you're not up against CHRONOJET, you want to go second, your opponent gets to go first. Going first is still really good for every other overdress deck except CHRONOJET. So this just helps you when your opponent does go first. It helps you survive their first turn, so they don't push it into you too bad, or they just don't straight up win depending on the deck. Next, I'm running for the push into soul crit. I know some people like Derek Dow. Nothing on Derek Dow. He's an excellent player. I know Derek Dow said that you don't have to play these. You could cut these. That running the 5Ks are better. I would rather have it and not need it than to need it and not have it, is always my saying. Because there are lines to where because all your boosters are 8Ks. Your boosters aren't 8Ks and 6Ks if you have to call it PG. Your boosters aren't 10Ks. If you're running Swirler, it's 13K, which in front of a grade 2 makes a magic number, but in front of a grade 3 doesn't make a magic number. So there are certain lines though, whereas you do call this down as a booster, give 2K to the booster, at least something behind your Vanguard, and makes your Vanguard CHRONOJET an ideal number. To whereas like they maybe could have chanced a 1 to pass, or if you didn't give that 2K, it would have been a 2 to pass, but because you did give them that 2K, they do now have to expend more guard from their hand. 3 crit, and 4 heal. I know I explain this every deck profile, but I really don't believe in effect heals right now. I feel like the effect heals are like the worst triggers to play in the game right now. I feel like the second worst trigger are draw triggers low-key, because it's like more, from what I've been noticing, more or not, the top tier decks just tend to not play draw triggers, because they go through the deck so fast naturally that playing the front is actually like not just an added benefit to the top tier deck, but it's actually a must. There's been on 2 separate occasions that because I ran fronts and my opponent was playing draws in the mirror match, they lost. Like, they lost because they decked themselves out on triple draft. Because you go through, in this deck especially, you go through your deck like super fast. Super fast. And also, the fronts are really helpful if your opponent likes trying to 2 to pass you and you check a front. So it's just automatic power to the Vanguard, so you don't have to like choose on where to allocate it. But that's basically it, guys, for my CHRONOJET Dragon deck profile. I know this was a little bit long, but I did want to go over some key points / plays that I did do differently with this deck versus any other deck. The grade 1 lineup still could use some tweaking, but I'm really happy with the grade 3s, the grade 2s, and the trigger lineup. I'm very happy with the rest of the deck. That's the only thing that I am a little bit iffy on, and you could tweak to your preference. But yeah, anyways guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you thought about the deck down below. Tell me what you would want to see in the future on this channel. And yeah, we could either like talk about it, or I could just straight up do it. For Sunday discussion videos, I'm thinking about just doing a Sunday stream. So let me know what you guys think about that in the comments. I'm probably going to make a community post about it, but let me know what you guys think about that in the comments. Anyways, again, for the third time, later.